Record. Okay, hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of How to Start a Podcast. It's a show on how to start, build, and grow a podcast, featuring advice from people within the community, just incredible creators out there. And today I am so excited to introduce y'all the inimitable Michael Sikand. So Michael, I'm going to ask you for a quick 30-second intro to just like intro yourself to the audience and how you got started with podcasting.
For sure. Yeah. What's up, everybody? My name is Michael Sikand. I'm the founder and CEO of Our Future, and Our Future is a podcast and media brand designed for Gen Z. So we are the go-to business podcast and media brand for Gen Z. I built Our Future because I didn't believe there was a business podcast designed for young people. I wanted to disrupt the category of business podcasts for my generation by bringing a fun, relatable, and energetic voice, as well as content that was shorter than the average podcast with guests and questions that mattered to my generation, as well as marketing that content on platforms where my generation spent a lot of time on social media. So that's how I got involved. It's been a year in the making now. We're about to hit our 1-year anniversary, and it's been an incredible ride of over 140 episodes as of today.
Awesome, dude. That was amazing. And then I think since you started, you've spoken to the co-founder of Netflix, the founder, I think, of Quizlet. You started like a newsletter, you got merch going, your TikTok videos have like over, I think I'm getting this right, like over 200,000 views. So
yeah, 600,000 in the past month.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's incredible. So I'd love to dive into this a bit deeper, but before we do, can you give us a quick synopsis on just the process itself? And then like we can go through like a few more like focus questions.
The process of putting together a podcast?
The process of how you went about like getting those kind of interviews, how you went about like growing that like audience on TikTok and stuff, just that sort of just your journey through that phase of things.
That's really broad, but I will. What do you want me to focus on first? Like, do you want me to focus on how to get guests, how to create social media content for the podcast? I just don't want to ramble on about a million things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's do a two-parter. One is how do you get those guests, and the second one is either you can choose, you can go on why you chose TikTok, or the second one could be, or alternatively, how you just like grew on TikTok. You know, like either one of that, like that's a bit more vague, but the first one is just like how did you even end up getting these people?
Yeah, sure. So you're right, Krish. I have had some crazy people on the podcast. And it all started out when I opened my business school. I'm sitting here right now in the Ross School of Business at Michigan. I'm a student there. I opened our alumni magazine, and I literally sent an email to every single person because I had their information in our alumni portal. And everyone who's written about in the magazine, I was like, wow, what a cool career they've had. And I reached out to all of them. Almost all of them replied. And I did an interview with them as some of my earlier guests on the podcast. So really leverage your school network, really leverage like the network that is close to you. And then you can reach whoever you want to in the modern world. You know, I've even emailed people like Mark Cuban and Bill Ackman, and though I haven't had them on the podcast yet, I'm optimistic that I will, because I've already knocked on their door and gotten, you know, my foot in and had them respond to my email. Like, it's crazy to think that there's billionaires who hang out in their email inboxes. So you can get anybody in the world that you want to. You just have to reach out and make sure that you're reaching out in an interesting, exciting, short, and informative way. You know, if you're a young person starting a podcast, you have a big advantage. You know, you're young, you're doing something big, you have this mission. Make sure it's a very mission-driven focus you have in your email. Talk about what you're doing. You know, my original emails to a lot of these people were, you know, COVID is hit and young people are upset because they got their internships canceled. They want to hear from, you know, business leaders about what's going on because they've lost their interest in the business world. So it's like, I'm going to be the voice of my generation. So I think it's important to talk about your mission. I think it's important to talk about your social proof. So like, how many listeners do you have? You can kind of exaggerate those numbers, of course. Who have your past guests been? So just like trying to establish credibility as well as like your personal mission and why they should respond to your email as opposed to everyone else who sends up a pitch. Again, if you're a young person, you can create a really unique mission, and you can come from the angle of being a curious student and a sponge, and you just want to learn, and you're not going to take more than 20 minutes of their time. That will enable you to get people's attention and have them respond to your emails, and just being really strong about follow-ups, really confident about that, as well as hitting people where they are, whether it be on LinkedIn or Twitter, Instagram, make a spreadsheet, find where these people are on the internet and try and hit them everywhere. Because if you really want them, you can find a way to get to them. And if you don't get to them the first time, you should keep following up if you really want that person. So I think being very intentional about that process is key.
Okay. Thanks for that. And then the second one was almost, how did you grow on TikTok? Or alternatively, like, why did you choose that platform amongst the other ones that were available?
Yeah, so TikTok has this crazy ability for your content to blow up and have this like tremendous organic reach out of nowhere. And if your podcast is relevant and informative and educational, there's no reason why it can't be succeeding on TikTok. There's no reason why you can't be someone who's getting hundreds of thousands of views on TikTok. And it's something that I was afraid of. I was like, wait, I'm doing a business podcast. There's no way my content will work on a platform that was built for dancing. But then I realized there's this huge community of people who were doing like business TikTok. And I saw that their content was doing well. I said, I don't know why I couldn't get my interviews to go well on there. And I think a lot of it comes down to like a good intro. Because if you're just trying to put your clips of your podcast on TikTok, it's not going to work. You have to be able to sell someone on why they should invest like a few seconds in watching that clip from your podcast. And for me, it's usually doing a green screen video. So it's like, hey, everybody, this guy has raised $5 million and he's only 23. I brought him on the podcast. Check it out. And then it'll cut to the clip, right? So you have like a small amount of time to make someone invested in your video. And it's important to have that hook. So I usually have like a hook. Like I've never really had a video blow up without a hook. So whatever content you're promoting the podcast, set it up in a way that will make people want to watch it. One way I think could be successful is like, if you're like, okay, you're hearing all this talk about NFTs. I talked to an expert about NFTs and then it cuts to that. Like, I think that would be successful. Or it's like someone with a crazy story. This guy walked across the earth 7 times over, brought on the podcast, right? So that's like my strategy. It's like quick introduction, do the clip. And I'm still not that big on TikTok. Like surprisingly, like even though how crazy my content is, I'm under 10K, like we're at like 8K followers on TikTok. But it's really a growth platform that I'm going to invest in heavily because it's driven a lot of interest and awareness for our podcast because there are not too many podcasts that are on TikTok. So it's like an interesting place to be. So definitely be on it.
Awesome. So then the way I'd like to structure this is like let's do a deep dive on how you ended up like getting those interviews and like, like the strategies you use and stuff like that. And then the second part of it could be more about like how you actually leverage TikTok to be the growth engine that you do. So starting on number 1 right now, can you like just lay out a few of because you mentioned something about how you just cold email people, right? Like these billionaires, Mark Cuban and all, they're just chilling out in their inbox. They're at least responsive, not everyone, but at least some of them are. And so how did you, like, what were effective strategies that you use, and maybe like do like a top 5 if you want, to actually do this sort of outreach and stuff? And like, what was there something in the content that you added as a hook? Like, just walk us through that process.
Yeah, I think you should definitely hook people with the first line of your email. So it's like, okay, it's like if you're emailing Mark Cuban, be like, hey, Mark, I'm sure you get 100 of these a day, but you should open this email because I'm unlike any podcaster you've ever met, right? I think that was my pitch to Mark Cuban. Then I was like, my name is Michael Sikand. I'm a 21-year-old student and founder of Our Future. We're the #1 business podcast and media brand for Gen Z. I conduct funny, short, electric interviews with some of the world's most well-known founders, executives, and student startups. And I've had these guests before, and my clips have generated millions of views on the internet. Will you join me? I promise this will be one of the most fun interviews you've ever had. So clearly that's a very short email. That's really how I go about it. I think personalizing is always better than not personalizing. I have gotten a lot of guests from just sending out mass emails to people I've discovered via, these email finding services, right? You can subscribe to a company like, say, Rocket Reach is what I use, and it's expensive. It's like $75 a month, but it can pretty much get you any email you want in corporate America. So really, I've just done a like massive outreach, like doing a kind of a template there, and kind of trying to get people's attention. Okay, and I think just like,
perfect. Sorry.
Yeah, I think just like being funny. Like, I think I sent one recently. I was like, now that the Suez Canal is open, like maybe your inbox is too. And I think the CEO of Spindrift, I was like, I haven't confirmed him yet, but I was like, yo, I'm on my 10th Spindrift of the day. My mom's thinking of calling the ER. But I love it. I love it so much. That's why you should do an interview with me about your company, your sparkling water company. So, I think just like being creative, like you have nothing to lose. Like, I don't care if I'm cracking a joke, like when I'm emailing a big executive. you really have nothing to lose, and they'll admire that and they'll like that. So just go for it and just throw out emails, and you can get anyone, honestly. You can get a lot of people.
Yeah, that's insane that you use the email pickup lines for
Yeah.
oh my God, that's hilarious. So then
Yeah.
but then not everyone will say yes instantly, right? Like you said, there's a few that are maybe completely cold. There's some that might be like super down instantly. I'm wondering what your conversion process is like for people that are like maybes, or hey, this looks kind of interesting, and then it kind of drops off to like a yes. Like, have you gone through that experience? And then like what worked and what didn't?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people like, hey, if they respond, they're like, hey, like not at this time, like I'm not sure I can do it. So you just follow up in that amount of time. And with Dave Brandon, who's like the former CEO of Toys R Us, Domino's, this guy's crazy. He originally said, no, I can't do it, but it's really cool what you're doing. And then I reached out like 2, 3 months later, and I was like, yo, what do you do? He's like, you're very persistent. I would love to come on the podcast. So I think just like following up with people who don't respond, and then trying to get them on. And then if they do respond, just like follow up in the amount of time they say, like, okay, reach out in a month, reach out in a month, right? So just be aware of that and track that, and have a way of like understanding like when you should reach back out, because if they said they could be down in a certain amount of time, then you should go after them again.
Okay, and then when you send those emails, like what is your how do you think about the amount of content you put on there, right? Because it's very easy to maybe over elaborate or say too much. And then how do you like think about like keeping it
Yeah,
short, that kind of
don't
stuff?
keep it short. Keep your emails short. Don't keep them long. These people don't have the time to read a massive email. They won't read it if it's long. Just have it be really short and invite them on the podcast, but like try and get across why you're really unique, right? In that short email, right?
And then
Um,
okay, go for it.
yeah.
Okay, I was like wondering, like, do you add like resources? Like you're like, oh, here's something I've done recently, like, or like just trying
Yeah,
to
and
get that. Yeah.
my email signature links to our TikTok, our like website, our Twitter, like our Instagram, all that, like which have decent social proof. So, just giving them access to the content, they can go check it out if they want to. And putting like a link to your content in the description of the email, right? So they can go check it out. Like I've had like the CEO of DoorDash like click on my thing. I've had, the Palmer Lucky of Oculus Rift do it. I've had like these crazy people, like you can track it, like they click your link, right? See what you're
Yeah.
about, which is hilarious. So yeah, these people do open their emails. So yeah.
Okay, and then how do you I guess the question I have then is like I having gone through our future, it's so incredible because there's so many different types of people there. How do you go about like identifying the right people to come on the podcast? Like what does that process look like for you?
Well, I mean, for the most part, for the past year, I've just been leading my audience with my curiosity for the business world. Like, I am like kind of just reaching out to a lot of different people that I think are interesting, and there's no theme. Like, I'm not segmenting based on subject matter, I'm segmenting based on audience. So, like, anything I create, I think will be relevant to a young person in business, as opposed to I think would be relevant to a young person who's interested in X. Really, I'm just going after the overall like very curious young leader, like young Gen Z entrepreneur. And that opens up a lot of opportunity for me to just go out and cast a really wide net about who I get on the podcast. Some criteria I've used in the past is like focusing on startups that young people like know. And I'm sorry, delete that. Not for startups, but companies, right? So like I've had the former CEO of like Toys R Us, and I've had like brand leaders from Vans and Chipotle and like the Morning Brew, and like companies that people already know. So it's really interesting to hear from the decision makers behind those brands, not necessarily the CEO, but like executives. Like I've had Beyond Meat, Peloton, like people know these brands and they think they're really cool. So they think it's really fascinating to kind of learn from the executives who are at those companies and who represent the decisions going behind those brands, right? And those well-known startups. So I think just like segmenting for that. And I think I've interviewed several young people. Like I used to do a series where I'd interview young people who had landed their dream job. So, if it was all based on like the brand name, like, oh, they landed Goldman, they landed McKinsey, they landed Bain. Okay, that interview is going to get a lot of interest. A lot of people are going to want to listen to that. And now like I'm interviewing more student startups. So like if they're a student startup, like they've got to have like a certain amount of sales they can say. They've got to like have raised money, right? Like now I'm optimizing for virality, right? Because I've been doing this for a while and I've been creating a ton of content. I think I've created a good platform for myself, but it doesn't make sense for me to do an interview now unless it's going to get me hundreds of thousands of views. And I am now focusing on like people, stories, topics that are going to be very viral. So whatever it is, I don't have a filter on the content, but it's like, is this a story that's going to get a ton of attention? Like, is there something this person's going to say that's going to make this podcast extremely relevant and extremely controversial potentially to make the content do, excuse me, exceedingly well on social media?
So it's almost like it's not you're like, you started with keyword search where you're like, hey, let me get people from like popular brands or like well-known companies because people naturally search for that and then they will find me. And now, I guess now that you've accumulated like, let's say a threshold of audience viewership, you're moving into, I am the platform, but I'm trying to like hit like 10x this number. And so okay. And then does your speaker, like, do you leverage their audience in any way, or are you like almost like independent of their audience? Right.
I always ask my speaker to repost. Doesn't always happen. Really good when it does because it generates a lot of publicity. Like if they put it on their Instagram, their Twitter, their LinkedIn. Always ask multiple times for them to repost it. If they don't, right, you can't make them, but really try and get them to do it because it's a whole nother audience to get eyeballs for your podcast from.
Okay. And then, so then let's say you got that interview, and you're saying that you're trying to optimize for virality. Is that now a transition into the TikTok version of this, like the post interview awareness building side of things, right? Like, is that where, okay. Okay, cool. That's interesting. So then when you post these things on TikTok and stuff, like, I guess now that we've transitioned there, the first thing is, I think you mentioned that TikTok's a medium where you don't need too many followers implicitly, like it just surfaces. It's a good discovery tool.
You don't need followers to get discovered.
Right. Okay, so then you solve almost the chicken and egg problem that like Facebook, Instagram, all of those have, which is I need to find people to like my content. So then I have an audience to watch this. But then how does this repeat though? Like, how do you, because then you don't have like a built-in base, right? That you can like be assured that these many people will see this. Like
nobody on TikTok is really assured that a certain amount of people will see it, right?
Okay.
It's about how good and attractive the content is. And that's why I'm going after people with good stories. Because if there is a good story that's going to get a lot of attention and a lot of comments, then that story is going to perform extremely well on the algorithm, regardless of your followers, right? So it's about the content on TikTok. It's not about the followers you have. And that's why like I'm really trying to optimize for the best content in terms of like the best stories, the most viral quotes, like the most viral clips, because that's what's going to get me like the views that my content deserves, and generate the awareness that I need to get this podcast to the next level.
Okay. Then do you think about using TikTok as like a conversion funnel to your other, because I am like, I've seen that your Instagram, your Facebook, like you have a bunch of other like presences. And so do you think of converting your TikTok audience to them to ensure some degree of like stability on an episode by episode basis? Okay.
Yeah. So, so people, if they go and click my content, they'll go on Spotify or Apple, and then they'll hopefully subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. So I'm actually driving people to YouTube now. It's kind of a new endeavor of mine. Just throwing my clips on YouTube so I can capture some like kind of more analytics, and then that's just like a more long-term platform I feel like for our future, but it is a lot of work and it's something I'm still kind of considering. And then they'll go follow on Insta, they'll go sign up to our newsletter, so like all of that is set up so I can get long-term followers, right? So the conversion from TikTok is a listener, right, or a watcher or a viewer, and then the goal is that they think it's such great content that they're going to subscribe.
Do you have a shout out at the end of your videos, or like what do you do to ensure that follow through onto your other things?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't usually shout out like go and do this, like people will just like go do it. But yeah, you should probably be shouting out, like make sure you're following the podcast, like make sure that you check out our other socials. I always like make sure you're following us on other platforms and whatnot. I say that often. And then go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that's one of the greatest drivers of growth for any podcast is to get reviews there.
Wait, why? like can you explain the reviews
Yeah.
to Discover?
Yeah. So I don't know the science behind it. All I know is the more reviews you get on Apple Podcasts, the more likely you are to get discovered on the Apple Podcast app.
Okay.
So that's just like a tenet from a lot of other podcasters who have grown, like their main growth drivers have been Apple Podcast reviews.
Interesting. And then what is your like listen? Because like Spotify is like growing. There's like so many different like I guess platforms now. Like, what do you think about what is your split right now in terms of Apple Podcasts, like Spotify and Google
Yeah.
Podcast? Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's like 30% Spotify, and then the rest is other platforms like Apple and whatever, Google Podcasts. I probably would have expected Spotify to be higher, but it continues to be like more like that 1/3 number. And I think it's
Okay.
been the same for some of my other friends who are doing podcasts too.
Interesting. So then is Apple Podcast the 2/3 like majority there, like the remaining, or I'm so
Yeah,
curious what that's.
I would assume so. I mean, we could take a look right now. I mean, I'm not sure how, great these analytics are on my Fireside, which is the one I use, Fireside.fm.
Okay.
But we could look at user agents, and yeah, it's looking like 50.9% are Apple Podcasts. We're looking at 22% other. We're looking at Google Chrome for 8.6%, Amazon Podcast for 7.2. So yeah, it's looking like Apple Podcasts, like 50%.
Still the dominant player. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so interesting because I would just assume that Spotify, I like Apple Podcast is huge, but Spotify's cross-platform, so I just assume they would be able to like subsume that at some point. Have you seen like a lot of growth there, or is it just tapered off at their, like I think you mentioned this before, but it's just tapered off now?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of growth on Apple Podcasts or whatever, or
No, I meant Spotify because I just assumed that would be like it's available everywhere. Like Apple Podcast is just Mac and iOS devices.
yeah, I mean Spotify, but like Spotify, like you have to have a subscription, right? And I don't know how many people use it. I don't know how many people have accounts. Like I'm not the right person to speak to in terms of like what the spread is. But if I look at like all time, and then I look at, my followers, like it's pretty much it's a exponential curve, right? Of followers on Spotify. So I don't think that's slowed down. Like I'm always linking Spotify. A ton of people have Spotify. It kind of looks like this. It's an E. I mean, it continues to drive growth, discovery on Spotify through other platforms. Like the first thing people can click on when they find my content on TikTok is they can listen on Spotify, and that gets a ton of like clicks proportionally. They can listen on YouTube, or they can watch on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts. So since we've been doing YouTube, like it's definitely been getting a good amount of like clicks in comparison. I can, bring up some more analytics, like in terms of like what the people on TikTok are clicking on. So I've messed around with it a bit. Like this isn't consistent for all time. But if I look at, let's see. So if I look at, list on Spotify from TikTok conversions, list on Spotify has nearly little under double list on Apple Podcasts. And I only just started posting on YouTube, which is a bit like half of list on Apple Podcasts. So it's looking like a lot of people have looked at that. Generally, cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then wait, so you said you're able to track on a granular level, like your TikTok conversion funnel from there.
So I'm not able to track who goes from TikTok to Spotify and becomes a subscriber. But I am able to like look at subscriber growth as in reference to like TikTok conversions out of the TikTok app, right? So it looks like there's been some good conversions, over the last 30 days. It's been very successful because our TikTok content is doing really well.
Okay, so you're just like TikTok gives you that implicit tracker funnel to see like, hey, here's how many people like click through or something.
Exactly.
That's what.
Exactly. So that's I use beacons.ai, right? Beacons.ai is a platform to track your clicks. It's where you can host all your content. So go listen on these platforms. You can put it all on there. That's kind of our spread. So yeah, we have a pretty good conversion rate. Like for people who go and click on our Beacons page, we have like 82% of them actually go and navigate to one of our platforms. So that's really good. So when people find our content on TikTok, they're very interested in it because it's marketed well and it's interesting stories.
So then what's your TikTok to beacons conversion rate? So 82% is beacons to platform. What is
Yeah.
TikTok to beacons?
TikTok to beacons is extremely low, right? You get so many thousands of views on TikTok, but most of them don't become followers. Like a small percentage of them will like click to follow. An even smaller percentage will just view your profile, right? Like I'll show you this. Like if I go to my TikTok analytics, right? So I'll go to TikTok. I'll go to, creator tools, analytics, right? So profile views, I'll go, last 7 days. All right, so in the last 7 days, I've had 50.8 thousand video views, but I've only had 1,400 people go to my profile, right? So 1,400 out of 50,000 is like what, so that's 1 out of 50.
Less than
so
10%.
Like 0.5. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a less. So, but then of the people who actually go to my profile, like how many are clicking my link in bio? So I can look at my last 7 days, like in the last 7 days, we've had 112 people click on that link in bio. So then it's a 10% conversion rate from that. So really it's a 0.00, like 1% conversion rate from TikTok. And that's just how TikTok is. It's a low conversion rate platform. It's a lot of eyeballs, but they're not necessarily like a high conversion rate platform. We have much higher conversion rates on LinkedIn, right? Where like, our average kind of, web click is a lot higher. So like essentially I'll go and I'll look at, let's see, like our merch drop, right? Like we had 500 impressions and 227 clicks with a 46.42% click-through rate on our new merch drop to go see that. And then like I just interviewed this Greylock partner, this co-founder, like very successful, 21% click-through rate, 132 clicks. So like LinkedIn has a way better conversion rate because like it's businessy, like you're already there, like it's just a more higher conversion rate platform, right? So different platforms have different levels of conversion rate. I'd say Instagram's very low. Twitter, I'm not sure because we're not very big there, but that's from what I can tell from like our two main platforms, which are like LinkedIn and TikTok.
So what is the best way of optimizing that? Because is LinkedIn good at discoverability, or because the feed I see is like from my followers and their network, like maybe
LinkedIn is very good discoverability. My content often goes viral on LinkedIn, like it'll hit thousands and thousands of people, way more than I have followers. Like I have nearly 3,000 followers on LinkedIn now, and our future has 1,200 followers, so we're at nearly 5K total. But like our content is viewed by tens of thousands of people per week, because it's able to be projected to a larger audience. It's like TikTok. Being on LinkedIn, you have that organic virality. And pretty much all of our early growth of the podcast came from LinkedIn. It was pretty much the only platform I was using to promote the podcast. And now TikTok has been like that other kind of big growth driver. So yeah, I think if I look at my Spotify conversion rate, like it's looking like, my conversion rate for Spotify, right, from listeners to followers. So if I go to Spotify for podcasters real quick. So it looks like my conversion rate is about 25%, or maybe a little higher than that. So
let's say,
it's around a little over 25% for people who listen to my podcast on Spotify, and then the ones who end up clicking follow.
Okay, so like around okay, that's interesting. And then you're saying, so why do you choose? Why use TikTok at all? Like, I guess that's an extreme question. Like what is the thought process between, like, I guess resource allocation between LinkedIn and TikTok? Like, is it better for you now to like focus on TikTok, or are you still like 90% LinkedIn, 10% TikTok? Like, what does that spread look like?
Yeah, well, what I do is I create a video clip that like the highlight reel, and then I'm like, that content is going to do well on TikTok. So I'll post the highlight reel to LinkedIn. Okay. Standalone, no intro. I'll post it to Instagram, I'll post it to Twitter, right? So it'll go on all those platforms, like it'll rack up, several hundred views each, right? But then on TikTok, like the potential for views is way higher. It'll be like tens of thousands potentially, right? So I'll definitely post like different variations of that same clip, different intros, test around a few different things, and try and get as many views out of that content as I can. But just given the nature of like TikTok, like it does have that potential to get thousands of views for your content. So it's totally worth it to like invest a bit more time. So like I'd spend way more time like working on TikTok variations than writing out the LinkedIn post for that video, even though both take like a good amount of time. I probably am spending more time on TikTok, focused on TikTok now, because it is delivering me that higher growth than the other platforms. And
Interesting. So,
it's just getting me a ton of views and a ton of like global PR.
yeah.
So
I mean, it's awareness, right? Like at the end of the
it's
day,
awareness.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
So then how do you, we kind of brushed through this early on, and I just want to like recap this for people listening. How do you, like, what is the most effective way of converting a viewer, a casual eyeball on any of these other platforms to like a listener, right? And like the
It's got to be
let's say
dope.
yeah.
It's got to be dope. All right. You saying go click follow, go follow me on like at the start
Like,
of the
comment,
podcast.
subscribe.
Yeah, like you saying that, like, yeah, that you should do that, right? Like you should, because like it might get a few people to like be like, oh yeah, shoot, forgot. But like at the end of the day, your content has to be really cool, really interesting, and has to be sweet. And people have got to want to listen, and they've got to want to think your brand is very cool and exciting. Our Futures brand is extremely cool and exciting. Our logo is dope. We've got team members on LinkedIn. We've got really cool design, aesthetic, guests, all that. And people genuinely want to be a part of our ecosystem because the content is cool. It's still a tremendous challenge for us to get conversions, right? That's just something that you have to deal with in media. Like it's just very hard to build an audience. But at the end of the day, your stuff has to be really cool for you to be able to grow your podcast. It's got to be unique, different. And that's really what the world of content is. You have to bring something new to the table for people to care. And they will follow, they will like, because if they do really love it, they'll feel like they need it and they want to come back to it. So that's the biggest piece of advice for getting conversions across these platforms, right? You got to have a cool brand and you got to have great content.
So that sounds like a very resource intensive thing to go through. And I'm sure that when you started off, you didn't have like all these different like resources at your like disposal, I guess. So for somebody like a young college student, like our age, like just starting out, like how would you, or maybe just somebody with like little to no resources, like what kind of strategies would you suggest there in terms of just growing?
I have almost no resources. Like,
okay.
I mean, I have a cool team,
Sure.
but like I don't have much more than any other person starting the podcast. I'm only a year in. I'm not making a ton of money. I'm not in a crazy position. I don't have a huge audience, right? But like, I'm on the path to that, right? Still, like after a year, right? It's a hard journey to build an audience in podcasting, and it's really, it really is a very challenging endeavor, right? And it's one that I enjoy, like trying to crack. I would have been on TikTok since day one. In fact, I probably would have done TikTok to YouTube conversions, right? So what I would have done is I would have tried to track TikTok to YouTube. Because YouTube, like you get a lot of analytics, like you get very few analytics when you're in podcasting, just on Spotify and Apple, those platforms. Like what's really important is that you are getting like conversions, like you said, right? So I would have started on TikTok, like try to market my interviews, blow them up, then drive people to watch the full interview on YouTube. So I would focus on like video, like a lot, like it's going to be hard to grow like an audio only podcast. Like I don't think you're going to be able to grow an audio only podcast. There's got to be video. There's got to be clips, because young people, like a lot of them don't listen to podcasts. Like they don't have time for them. They might just watch your 60-second clip, or like be able to read your newsletter, or like maybe like a piece of written content on LinkedIn. Like that is the new definition of how you grow a brand. Like it's not like how many people are listening to your podcast, how many people are like seeing your content in general around your brand. Like change the way you think of views, because if you're getting 10,000 views on your LinkedIn post and like a 10,000 views on your TikTok, you add that all up, and that's the number you should be using when you're pitching people, because it's about people seeing the story. It's about people seeing it. Just because they don't listen to the full audio podcast doesn't mean that your content isn't interesting. It means that what it means to be a media brand now is distributing content in a bunch of different formats and mediums. And you need to track every view you're getting on those platforms and bring them all together to realize what impact you're having. Because you might look at your podcast streams and be like, wow, those are tiny. But when you think about the way you're promoting your content across the internet, across these platforms, it'll be much bigger. And that's how you need to look at your modern podcast.
Okay. And then do you think there's any, that was actually like really insightful. So thank you so much for that. Like the sequence of events is very interesting. One quick thing I wanted to ask was, you said you'd start on TikTok and then move to YouTube. Like, where's LinkedIn
Yeah.
in that sequence? Like, is that even there?
LinkedIn's there. Like I built like a big personal brand for myself on LinkedIn. Like so many people will reach
Mhm.
out to me on LinkedIn. Like people come to me with guest pitches. Like I meet people on LinkedIn. I made friends off LinkedIn. It's a community. Like it's just like a great place to be visible, like be confident and like stand out like in the
Mhm.
world. Like it's a great place to create content. I would 100% be on LinkedIn. I'm doing a business podcast. That's where business podcasts will succeed. So I
Okay.
would 100% be on LinkedIn. Like it's a very authenticating even organic reach platform. And like, it's extremely important to have people, a lot of people go to my LinkedIn, then go to our website, then they might convert to a newsletter subscriber, right? So that's another way they're kind of finding our content, right? So I think that's all, you
Okay.
know, um, very key.
Okay. Cool. So I guess those were like the main questions for this. Thank you so much for taking the time for this, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks a
Yeah,
ton.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me
I,
know when it's up and I'll repost it and everything. And let me know what your plan is for all this. I mean, I assume you're putting together like a
yeah.
course or something for podcasters. Like you're trying to do like
Uh,
how to start a podcast course or something.
YouTube videos. I just want to create, so because I'm doing Tassle, which is like the automated highlights thing. I just want to create like a way for, it's my conversion fund. Like I want podcasters to find this content which is useful to them. They'll find Tassle. And then that
Got
like
it.
just sort of access like
Got it.
evergreen
Content
content on YouTube.
marketing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what I was like. I was just trying to figure out ways of creating content that lasts like a while. And like YouTube seemed like the best place for that to exist. And then like this seemed like a natural thing for that to
Yeah,
be.
it is the best way. It's a very visible platform. So like let me know. A
Yeah.
lot of people ask me like how I have done what I've done. So it'd be easier if I could just send them to a YouTube video. So if you publish this YouTube video, I'll share it out for like months and years to come about people asking me how I do what I do. Cause I think I
Sweet.
answered pretty much every question about like my current status in there
Awesome.
for
Oh,
my podcast.
do you have any feedback for how we did? This is my first time like doing an interview. So like please tell me.
Yeah, I mean, just probably be more like, like answer, like ask kind of more detailed questions. Like, I
Okay.
didn't, you were trying to ask me these massive, broad questions. Like, I have a lot to share.
Mhm.
Like, make it a bit more niche. Like, in terms of like, because you're trying to teach your listeners something, right? So like, make
Yeah.
sure like they're getting a Q&A. But like, I think you did a good job. I think just, maybe like yeah, I think you were pretty conversational. Like, maybe just be a bit more like vocal and like, I don't know. I mean, just be a bit more assertive with your questions, I think. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I kind of took your format. If you didn't, I saw like I heard a few of your podcasts and I was like, this is how we get like, because your format is like so tight. Like it's a very like tight structure, which is amazing. It's like give the intro, do this, like here's the breakdown. Like it's so good. And I was like, oh, that I'm gonna try this out. So
Yeah. So what
yeah.
do you think about the content? What do you think about the podcast? What do you think about the content?
It's I think for me, it can sometimes get like it's not what I'm like necessarily like super into because like I try to like get like story like a more deeper story. Like so I don't know if you've heard Acquired FM. So would they, oh, you have? Yeah, I love Acquired, like because they spend like an hour, they like really get into it. And like that's when you like get like I think the time you spend, like you just get more key insights. And that like kind of works for my use case. I don't like the student interviews too much. Like it's interesting, but
Really?
like I like the people that are like sort of like the old wizened sort of people. Like they tend to have like more interesting stories and insights because the student founder ones tend to, for me again, like I'm making like the super broad like analysis. For me, they tend to feel like sort of the same like track sometimes. But again, that's just me. That's just like how I
A
like
what?
I can,
A what?
it feels like a similar track for a lot of the like the student stories versus like the ones that I find interesting is like people in different spaces. Like the one where you had was it this the JetBlue CEO? I think that's the one I'm
Yeah.
thinking of. And he was like
Co-founder.
the co-founder, and he like started. He was like a fighter pilot. Like that was super interesting. And like it's just I guess because they're older, they've had like these like non-traditional life experiences, and because they've
Right.
had that, they tend to be like more like it's just like so much more interesting. It's like, oh, how did you end up here? Like, what was that
Yeah.
journey like? And it's just yeah. So maybe it's not even just older. It's just like people with non-traditional life experiences tend to be more interesting to me. Uh, because that's what I'm trying to get out of it. And then for business stuff, I try to like look for something a little longer. Uh, just because I like the story. I like understanding how ARM like existed, right? Intel didn't give them the chips. Then they did this, then they made this strategic move, then they had this issue, and then you can like really get into it.
That's good feedback. That's good feedback because I feel like we've been getting a lot of attention based off our student interviews, student startups, but there's just too many podcasts out there that do like the big person interview. Like there's how I built this, and there's like acquired. Like I just don't know how, just because I'm a young person, that's why people would listen to these people on my podcast. Like the CEO of Netflix, he's